As I mentioned in the intro video, there are 142 employees in the dataset. Each has an ego network. In the interface, we use darker colors to represent upper-level employees, such as CEO, and paler colors to represent lower-level employees, such as employee. Let me first select the 4 CEOs to visualize the timeline visualizations. The dynamic ego networks are drastically different, and it's very hard to generalize what is common about their evolution patterns. To get a better sense of the data, I want to understand the density and size distributions of the ego networks. I want to create an MDS plot where ego networks with comparable fluctuation are closer. I construct 2 event types, size increases and size decreases. To create size increases, I select the size time series type from the context menu, and I specify a slope range, slope greater than or equal to 0.36. As I adjust the slope range, the ego network view provides a preview of the events that will be extracted if I create this event type. We adjust the slope range until we get a satisfactory result in the ego network view. To create size decreases, I set the slope to be less than negative 0.36. We can see that most people do not have a very fluctuating size. They only have very few orange and blue pixels. There are some outliers which have many blue and orange pixels, indicating that their size is very fluctuating. Let me select a dynamic ego network with fluctuating size and a dynamic ego network with a stable size. From the size time series, the size of this dynamic ego network really has more ups and downs than that of this dynamic ego network. To understand the density distribution of the ego networks, I create 3 event types. Density is small, density is moderate, and density is large. From the MDS plot, we can see that most employees have a lot of blue pixels, which means that most people maintain a low density over time. But this guy maintains moderate density over time, which makes him an obvious outlier. Finally, let us dive into more complicated evolution patterns. I'm interested in knowing the communication patterns in Enron. Who are those who communicate a lot with the executives, such as CEOs, presidents, and vice presidents, and who are those who communicate a lot with the low-level employees, such as traders and employees. I first use the shortcut to create the event type CEO appears in the ego network. As long as the CEO node appears in a snapshot of an ego network, a point event is added for that snapshot. From the MDS plot, an outlier Sally Beck immediately stands out. She's only a low-level employee as indicated by the pale color of the dot, but she communicates very frequently with the CEOs. I continue to add President appears in the ego network. While Sally Beck is still an obvious outlier, John Lavorato becomes another outlier. As you can see, both of them communicate very frequently with CEOs and presidents, but most of the employees do not communicate very frequently with CEOs and presidents. After adding Vice President appears in the ego network, Sally Beck moves closer to the other ego networks. This is because, like most other people, she does not communicate very frequently with vice presidents. Still, we find her interesting because she was only a low-level employee, but she communicates a lot with CEOs and presidents. We looked for her LinkedIn account and discovered that she was indeed a managing director rather than a low-level employee. We then add 2 more event types. Trader appears in the ego network, and employees appears in the ego network. The MDS plot seems to be divided into two halves. One half contains paler dots representing upper-level employees, while another half contains darker dots representing upper-level employees. An important characteristic of the upper half is that many dynamic ego networks have more purple or brown pixels than blue, orange, or green pixels, indicating that many low-level employees communicate more with traders and employees. On the other hand, an important characteristic of the lower half is that many of them have more blue, orange, and green pixels, indicating that the upper-level employees tend to communicate a lot with CEOs, presidents, and vice presidents.